Hello, everyone, and welcome to another X's and Dogs podcast. Today, we have what will end up being the very last podcast of the 2025 year, and also one of the last podcasts of the 2025 Browns season. So I wanted to take the chance to start today's podcast to thank you all for tuning in thus far. I know we are still very young here at X's and Dogs, and it is growing day by day. But thank you all for watching. Thank you all for liking, subscribing. I also want to take the chance to ask those of you who haven't yet liked and subscribed to go ahead and, take that opportunity to do so. It is greatly appreciated. It does provide me with extra motivation to continue to provide great content for you guys. And also, it gives you guys the opportunity to stay on top of podcasts, posts, anything that I release, frequently, and give you the chance to have quick access to that information. So with that said, we can go ahead and jump right into today's podcast, and we have some kind of fitting things to talk about in the Browns world as, we enter the new year. We have a very new game plan for the Browns going forward, specifically after the Browns did beat the Steelers this past weekend. I think that really changes a ton for the outlook of the Browns, kind of also how the Browns will probably attack free agency, the draft, the offseason as a whole, going into the year of 2026. And that's where we're going to start today's podcast. I think the win on Sunday really changed the way the Browns will more than likely look at the quarterback position in particular. Before Sunday, I thought the main question the Browns organization, the front office, the coaching staff, whoever that may be, in my opinion, it probably won't be Kevin Stefanski, and definitely could be Andrew Berry, but you never know. Jimmy Haslam definitely could decide to just move on from everybody. We'll have answers to those questions sooner rather than later as we quickly approach the end of the season. But regardless of who is in charge of those decisions, I believe before Sunday, they were going to have to decide, is Shedeur Sanders better than or provides at least an upside similar to the quarterbacks coming out of in the 2026 draft. So that is Dante Moore, Fernando Mendoza, maybe Ty Simpson. And that's the main question. Can Shedeur provide what they can provide, or do they have a much higher ceiling than Shedeur, and in turn would be worth taking that high, using that high draft pick on? So that was before Sunday. That was whenever I believed we would have a top 3 pick and have the great opportunity to at least evaluate these quarterbacks and decide if we want them. Now with this win on Sunday, more than likely, the Browns will have anywhere from the 4th, 5th, 6th, or even 7th pick in this draft, and more than likely won't have the ability to get one of these quarterbacks. So I think that very much does alter the way the Browns organization as a whole is going to have to look at and think about the quarterback position in terms of how they want to address it in free agency, in the draft, in the current players on the roster. Now I think with the win on Sunday, it's no longer about, is Shedeur better, or does he provide a similar upside, and can he do the same things these quarterbacks can do coming out in 2026? Instead, now it is about, are these quarterbacks worth trading a significant amount of assets up to get? Because the reality of the situation is that's what it would require to have a real chance to get one of these guys. More than likely, the Raiders are going to get the first pick. The Jets are going to be ahead of us. The Cardinals even now are likely going to be ahead of us. So that right there are 3 teams who will fall ahead of us in the draft that are almost guaranteed to be looking at the quarterback position. I would say, barring a fantastic couple performances by Ty Simpson here, there are only likely 2 quarterbacks that are going to be worth taking in the top 5. So if you just do the math on that, it becomes very unlikely that the Browns are going to have the opportunity to draft one of these quarterbacks without trading up. And so, is there going to be a team like the Titans or the Giants who fall in a position where they have the ability to trade their top draft pick to a team like the Browns who is quarterback needy? And if so, what is that price tag going to be? These are the questions and the things that the Browns now are considering and will have to consider more than anything really to do with Shedeur Sanders. I think the win on Sunday, and this is ironic, but the win on Sunday actually kind of took Shedeur Sanders out of the equation in my mind whenever you're looking at how the Browns are going to view the quarterback position. And it's ironic because more than likely Shedeur will be involved in that room. And it's also ironic because he was the quarterback that won the game on Sunday. But I don't think at this point Shedeur Sanders, he hasn't shown enough to make you think to completely forget about trading up to get one of these quarterbacks. He also hasn't shown enough or shown little enough or lack of flashes and potential to make you completely sold on the fact that you have to go up there and trade for these quarterbacks. So with both of those things being on the table, both sides of that equation, and Shedeur kind of laying right in the middle there, I think it just takes the evaluation of Shedeur Sanders kind of off the table with how you view the 2026 draft kind of, attack plan, because the reality of the Browns way about in going about the 2026 draft is that they will have to decide if they think the player in Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore or Ty Simpson or whoever is there can be a franchise quarterback and is worth likely using a couple first round picks for. Now, what my opinion on that is more than likely it's not worth using multiple first round picks. I was a guy who was completely on board with just taking the quarterback because we had a top 3 pick and because it's an opportunity to get a potential franchise quarterback without having to give up a ton of assets, and it's just not something the Browns have done frequently in my entire life. I think the Browns have only drafted a quarterback in the top 5 2 times. Both times in Tim Couch and Baker Mayfield, the team had some success right after. So that was my mindset. If we were in the position to take the quarterback without giving up assets, I believed it was the right decision to do so. Now that is off the table, and we more than likely are going to be required to give up an additional first, maybe even a couple first round picks to get one of these guys, I quickly and kind of vehemently advise against that. Now, there's a whole bunch of questions to consider in addition to that. Who's making the pick? Is it a new head coach? Is it a new general manager? Is it Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski? Because I will tell you this, if it is Andrew Berry in particular, I can almost guarantee you he is not going to trade multiple first-round picks to go up and get one of these guys. We know how obsessed Andrew Berry is with the idea of having a lot of draft capital and the ability to draft a lot of players. He does not want to give up a ton of assets, especially after that Deshaun Watson trade, which I believe scarred everyone involved in the Browns organization. I think they will be very reluctant to go up and move a ton of assets to get one of these quarterbacks. Now, if you bring in a new general manager who is young and hungry and really wants to find success quickly here in Cleveland and make a splash move right away, that's a different scenario. Maybe that person also loves Dante Moore and the Giants are picking second, or the Titans are picking second, and the pick is up for sale, and the Browns are a team that has 2 first-round picks this year and is willing to go up and make the move. So those are all things to consider. It's too early to kind of give my prediction on what will actually happen. But for me personally, I would advise against it. I think there are other ways to address the quarterback position, including Shedeur Sanders, including other veterans, including maybe a 2nd or 3rd round pick. And, that's not where I wanted to be at this point. I wanted to have the ability to draft one of these top quarterbacks, but the reality of the situation is the cards are more than likely not going to lie or fall in a manner in which we can realistically do that. So that's my mindset on kind of the way the Browns are going to or are going to have to attack the quarterback position, and also what's more than likely going to happen based on who's the coach, who's the general manager. It's just ultimately too early to make that estimation. But I do think there are some trends with Andrew Berry that to be talked about, and also the ability of maybe a new general manager and the willingness of them being greater to go out there and get one of these guys in comparison to Andrew Berry. So some interesting things to think about there, and it's something we're going to be talking about all offseason, I'm sure, because it really is probably the most important problem and scenario the Browns are going to be faced with this offseason. And it's safe to say things got a little tougher after last weekend, and it could get even tougher after this weekend if we find a way to beat the Bengals. But ultimately, I think more than likely next year, what we will see is a quarterback room with Shedeur Sanders in it. I think more than likely Deshaun Watson will be involved in that quarterback room, just based on the fact that this team will now not be able to afford the $80 million cap hit. I think if the team did draft that first round quarterback, with the top 3 pick that we would have had if we didn't win on Sunday, we have this new head coach and potentially a new general manager. I thought there was a good chance that those guys would decide, let's just bite the bullet right now, get Deshaun Watson off the roster, take the cap hit, the $80 million, I think it's like $80-something million cap hit, and just be done with the situation, cleanse ourselves of Deshaun Watson, move on. I thought that was a possibility a week ago. Now, with having Shedeur Sanders, and also Deshaun, and also building around the quarterback room will be more important, because there will be an expectation now moving on to Shedeur Sanders' second year where we need to start to win some games. If you have the rookie in and you have the first-year head coach in and the first-year general manager in, I think you can kind of get away with having that huge cap hit and just treating the year as a learning curve for the rookie quarterback. But if you decide to move on with Shedeur in his second year, I think you really do need to build the roster up around him. And I think the expectation will be to win 6, maybe 6 to 8 games next year. Be more competitive. Because what you can't have happen next year, if you do decide to move on with Shedeur and not invest in a couple first round picks in one of these quarterbacks in the draft, what you can't have happen is a repeat of this year where you're winning 4 games and Shedeur is throwing a ton of picks, because you'll have this new head coach now who will almost definitely be on the hot seat immediately, if that is the scenario. And I think they will want to make sure that's not the scenario. All that said, you won't be able to afford to take that cap hit, because you're going to need some free agency flexibility to go out there and get some offensive linemen, to go out there and get a second, third wide receiver, maybe a safety, maybe another edge rusher, wherever the case may be. You're going to need to fill in these kind of vacancies in the roster that do exist, especially on the offense, simply because there will be an expectation to win some games that otherwise I don't think would exist as strongly if you drafted the rookie quarterback in the 2026 draft. Maybe you guys disagree with that. Maybe you think you can still afford to take the cap hit and just move on from Deshaun. I think doing that wouldn't be the best process, because it would become tremendously difficult to fill all those roster holes. So that's kind of the tight line, or the tightrope balancing act that this Browns organization is going to need to do. And I think it's part of the reason why they'll probably just keep Andrew Berry, because what general manager who is more than likely going to be starting their career in the NFL as a general manager is going to want to take this job in Cleveland, where you have to deal with Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders, and now not even the opportunity to draft the first round quarterback without giving up a haul. I think this year they'll just give Andrew Berry another shot, especially after a pretty strong draft class. I'm not saying that that's the correct thing to do. I'm not saying that's a good way to go about deciding that you're going to keep your general manager. I just think it's more than likely going to be what happens here in Cleveland. But we'll see. We'll have the answers to that, I think, probably in the coming few weeks after the season. And there's a good chance Jimmy Haslam already has his mind made up on all of this. And that kind of segues right into the next topic I want to talk about today. I want to bring up, the Browns get this hard-fought win against a Steelers team who really needed to win this game, albeit their game plan was horrible. This was a really important game for them. It was a win and you win the division game, a win and in game for them. And they come into the Browns stadium, and the Browns did not get bullied. They did the bullying of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They fought for Kevin Stefanski. Believe it or not, they did. This team, still seems really motivated to play, which is impressive. But all of this said, the question is, does this win change anything for the outlook of Kevin Stefanski's job safety here in Cleveland? And I want to just quickly say, if Jimmy Haslam is swayed by one game, in week 17 of, this season where the Browns are 4-12. If he is swayed by one game, he is truly as bad of an owner as everyone says he is. And that, with that being said, absolutely in no way should this sway the decision of firing or keeping Kevin Stefanski. Now, I think before coming into this week, and I hope Jimmy Haslam already had his mind made up on, does he think Kevin Stefanski can be the coach of this team, or does he not? Me personally, I think it's time to move on. I think this has been back-to-back terrible years. The whole thing is kind of just poisoned right now. They need to just cleanse. They need to cleanse the whole entire room, get rid of everybody, in my opinion, for this thing to really get back on track. Now, regardless of if Jimmy Haslam agrees with me in that, or he disagrees and he thinks Kevin Stefanski can still turn this thing around somehow, whether it may be because he is just giving everybody a mulligan on the Deshaun Watson thing, and he they all accepted that was a terrible trade, and they're just trying to bounce back from that. In my opinion, that's bogus, because they're the ones that made that decision, and somebody needs to be held to the flame for that. But either way, whichever way he looks at it, I truly hope he had his mind made up on this decision before the Steelers game. And I equally hope that the Steelers game didn't sway him in either direction, because it's one football game in late December where the season's over. I get it. The Steelers wanted to win, but that game plan from Pittsburgh was horrible. They all they cared about was not allowing Myles Garrett to get the sack record. So, the greater point is you can't let one game at this point in the year, impact your decision impact a very overarching and important decision, especially in a game like the one on Sunday where the team scored 13 points. The weather wasn't great, however you want to look at it. So that's my answer. I've seen a lot of that being discussed on social media, podcasts, shows, etc. in the Browns world, and I just wanted to give my view on that situation, here on December 30th, because that decision will be addressed and will come out to us, will be released to us probably next week sometime. So, we'll have to wait and see, and we'll get the answers on all of that. I did want to make another point about the Browns coaching search and ability to get a new head coach in Cleveland, because the important thing to keep in mind whenever you're deciding if you want to fire a head coach or not, and for me, this doesn't really change my decision a ton, but it is playing a role in it. You have to keep in mind, who are you going to be able to bring in? Now, I think the Browns winning on Sunday does drastically impact the candidate that you'll be able to attract here in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, the Browns organization has a very bad reputation based on their owners. They also, it's Cleveland. It's not like a destination that people will want to end up playing for. It's a history of having no quarterbacks and struggling to find any sort of solution at the quarterback position. So all of these things exist, and you can say what you want, but it matters to these coaches who are looking for new jobs. And now that we have taken away the potential ability to advertise the fact that we have this top pick to draft a quarterback, I think things might get a little bit more challenging than they were before as it pertains to, attracting the best, the top candidates this year. Like, for example, if Mike Tomlin gets fired from Pittsburgh, I think he'll be one of the top candidates. He's a Hall of Famer coach. Like, he's a fantastic coach. He's run stale in Pittsburgh a little bit. I think he'll probably end up taking a year to kind of just reflect on all of that regardless. I think the same thing of John Harbaugh. It's very common for these sustained, successful coaches who eventually get fired or moved on from. It's very common for them to just take a year to reflect before they bounce right back into the coaching world. But let's use John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin as an example. These are guys who a lot of teams are going to want. If you have the head coach vacancy, you're probably going to be interested in these guys. Fill in the blank with whoever you think the top candidate is in this head coaching pool. What do we have to truly offer to them to attract them, into taking the Cleveland Browns head coaching spot? we have a young, talented defense. We just had a good draft class. Those kind of, to me, are really the only two. I guess maybe you could lump in, we have Jimmy Haslam, who is willing to spend a ton of money, but also you have to accept the fact that he's going to meddle. Like, he's going to meddle in, like, real football decisions. If you don't believe that's still going on, I would urge you to just do more research and think critically about some of the decisions that this team has made over the past couple seasons. I'd point you to firing Van Pelt, that Kevin Stefanski loved as his offensive coordinator. Firing him, I bet you Andrew Berry wasn't the one who was requesting that. I'd point you to drafting Shedeur Sanders. Like, there are still obvious footprints and fingerprints, I should say, of Jimmy Haslam all over this team. Like, I know there was this idea that Jimmy Haslam was kind of taking less of an impact, making less of an impact on the football decisions being made. And I would heavily combat that with some of the decisions made recently and some of the poor decisions made recently. So you can say that he will spend a lot of money, but he's going to be meddling in your business. He's going to want to have a say in all the important decisions being made. So there's that part of it. There's the fact the team hasn't had any sustained success for decades and decades. There's just so much working against the Browns that losing that top pick in the draft and the ability to draft a franchise quarterback really does negatively impact the way they're going to be able to attract a candidate, in my opinion. Now, it's a 1 of 32 job. It's the NFL. They're going to be able to get a guy who they like, who has the potential to be a good coach regardless. So that's where I draw the line of, it's not a good enough reason to keep Kevin Stefanski just because you think it's going to be hard finding the correct guy. If you believe that Kevin Stefanski is no longer the guy and cannot fix what's going on here in Cleveland, then you have to move off of him and you have to start that coaching search as early as you can. Get out in front of it. Get the candidates you want in early, interview them, make the job seem good somehow. Haslam maybe started off by saying, I'm willing to take a step back. I don't think he's going to do that, but say what you need to make this job seem attractive. And I think that's the route that needs to happen. Will it happen? Who knows? Now, I wanted to wrap today's podcast up, not talking about the Browns, actually talking about college football. We have the quarterfinals going on starting tomorrow on New Year's Eve, I should say. Your Ohio State Buckeyes, who I know a lot of you are fans of, facing off against Miami. I'm going to go ahead and do my picks for each one of these games in the quarterfinals here. I know I did my college football show a couple weeks ago now, where I did kind of pick the whole bracket. And I believe the only game I did miss so far was the Miami Texas A&M game. So apart from that, though, I think I ended up having Ohio State beating A&M anyway. So I don't think it's going to make a huge impact in my prediction bracket anyway. But to start, let's go in chronological order here with the Ohio State and Miami game. Ohio State is laying 9.5 points in this one. I think for a winner, I'm definitely choosing Ohio State. Now, if I was going to bet on Ohio State covering the spread, I would be a little bit more reluctant to do so, just because I think this Miami defense has the ability to keep this game close. I just trust the Ohio State offense a lot more than I trust the Miami offense. And I think both defenses are good. Miami is one of the only teams in the country who is physical enough at the line of scrimmage to battle with Ohio State for an entire game on both sides of the football. So I would probably lean Miami plus the 9.5 here, but I would definitely take Ohio State to win the game. Next up, Oregon, Texas Tech. I think this one's a noon kickoff on New Year's. Oregon's laying 2.5. This one actually, that line surprised me a little bit. I thought it would be a little closer to a pick'em. I thought maybe like Oregon would be favored like -1 or 1.5. But it does make sense to me that they're favored. This is going to be a really close football game, I believe. I think both of these teams have kind of equal talent. Texas Tech, to me, has a better defense, but I would say Oregon's offense is a little bit better. And I trust Oregon's quarterback more in Dante Moore. So I think I would take Oregon on the money line and Oregon covering the -2.5. I think they can win this game by a field goal. I just don't necessarily think Texas Tech can score with Oregon. And I don't think Texas Tech has faced an offense quite yet that is going to be as dynamic as Oregon's. So, yeah, give me Oregon in this one for sure. Moving on to, I believe this one's at 4 or 3:30 or 4 on New Year's. We got Alabama versus Indiana. This is probably my favorite game of the slate here. I've watched a ton of Alabama football this year because I was interested in Ty Simpson. I thought he was going to be one of the top quarterbacks coming out, potentially coming out in 2026. And, you know, as a Browns fan, we're always looking at the quarterback position. So same thing with Indiana, though. I watched a lot of their games just because Mendoza was having his dominant season, Heisman winner, etc. Now for this one, God, you know, I would be tempted to take Alabama on the money line. Now I'll say this: I'm definitely leaning Alabama plus 7.5. Indiana is laying 7.5 points. That's a big margin to me, and I'm surprised Vegas made it that much. I don't think Indiana's shown enough this season to think that they can beat Alabama by 8 points. So yeah, I'm going 100% Alabama plus the 7.5. Now, I think I'll still take Indiana to win the game, but I think it could be really close, man. I think that Alabama's going to give them a fight. I think at the line of scrimmage, Alabama's one of those teams that can face right up against Indiana and be physical with them, similar to, you know, the Ohio State game that Indiana played. So I think it'll be a close one. I'll take Indiana to win it, but definitely Alabama plus the 7.5. Moving into the last game of the slate, Georgia versus Ole Miss. This is the night game on New Year's Day. Georgia's laying 6.5 points. Now I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. I think Georgia wins this game by a touchdown. I think they'll cover the 6.5. And you know, that said, I think they'll win the game. So I just think Georgia's at this point the better team. I think with all the Lane Kiffin stuff going on, I think Ole Miss, this is going to be the end of the road for them. I'm not sure they'll have what it takes to compete with this Georgia team, who I think is going to win it all this year. They were my predicted college football champions this season. So taking Georgia minus 7.5, that one's my most comfortable pick of the slate. So that wraps up the college football games. Really, really good quarterfinals. I honestly think any of these teams can compete with the other one that they're playing. So they'll be close games. They'll be competitive. I do think this is a great representation of the best teams in the country. Like, these are probably the 8 best teams in the country, and we have them here in the quarterfinals. So that's fantastic. All that said, you guys enjoy your New Year's. Have a great time celebrating with family, friends. Let's get a great start to the 2026 year and enjoy the football games going on over the next couple days. I will talk to you all very soon, probably on Thursday. But until then, be safe, have fun, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.